Ողջույն բոլորին, հանրային լրագրության ակումբը մեդիա եւ տեղեկատվական գրագիտությունը նախադպրոցական կրթության մեջ ծրագրի շրջանակում իրականացնում է հատուկ նախակրթական հաստատությունների մանկավարժների համար, նաեւ դպրոցական տարրական հասարանների մանկավարժների համար եւ ծրագրի ամբողջ իմաստը եւ նպատակը կայանում է նրանում, որպեսզի հնարավորինս մանկավարժները կարողանան ավելի լավ երեխաների եւ վաղ մանկության տարիքում գտնվող մասնավորապես նաեւ երեխաների հետ կարողանան խոսել մեդիայի, թվային անվտանգության, բոլոր մարտահրավերների մասին, որոնք որ մենք մեր օրերում տեսնում ենք եւ հասկանում ենք, թե դրանք ինչ մեծ ազդեցություն են ունենում եւ մեր կյանքում եւ երեխաների կյանքում, նաեւ ինչպիսի ազդեցություն են ունենում դասյարակության գործընթացում։ Ես ուղղակի ուզում եմ հիշեցնել, որ այս ծրագիրը մենք իրականացնում ենք Հայաստանում ԱՄՆ դեսպանատան աջակցությամբ եւ նաեւ խոսքը կուզենայի փոխանցել մեր գործընկեր կառույցների ներկայացուցիչներին, հանրային լրագրության ակումբի ղեկավարին, որպեսզի իրենք եւս եթե ունեն ծրագրի հետ կապված ասելիք, վեբինարներին ձեր մասնակցության հետ կապված ասելիք, որովհետև մեր աշխատանքները այսքանով չեն սահմանափակվում եւ մենք հետագա համագործակցությունների լայն հնարավորություններ ենք ունենալու միասին եւ վստահ եմ, որ նաեւ ձեզանից շատերը արդեն ճանաչում են Շերրիին, ես ասեմ, որ նաեւ Դասընթացավար Շերրի Քուլվերը, ով ԱՄՆ Թեմփլի համալսարանի Մեդիագրագիտության կենտրոնի ղեկավարն է եւ մենք Շերրիի հետ համագործակցել ենք նաեւ մեր նախորդ ծրագրի ընթացքում, ով ամերիկյան լավագույն փորձը այսպես ասած ադապտացված հնարավորինս ավելի մատչելի եւ բարձ եղանակով մատուցել է մեր մանկավարժներին, ինչպես վեբինարների, այնպես էլ Հայաստան ժամանակակից ընթացքում օֆլայն տարբերակով, այնպես որ կարծում եմ, որ սա շատ լավ առիթ է նախ լսածը վերհիշելու, այնուհետև ավելի նոր, ավելի խորացված այսպես ասված մասնագիտությանը իրավիճակին տիրապետելու տեսանկյունից եւ մինչեւ սկսելը կներեք Շերրի, որ այսքան ցկցկեցինք մեկնարկը, մինչեւ սկսելը ես կուզենայի մեր մասնակիցներից մի քանիսը, ովքեր կուզենան կիսվել իրենց ակնկալիքներով, թե ինչ սպասելիքներ ունեն, եթե անգամ դուք նախորդ վեբինարներին եք եղել, ապա ձեր տպավորություններով կիսվեք, որից հետո մենք խոսքը փոխանցենք Շերրիին եւ սկսենք մեր վեբինարը։ Խնդրում եմ Rise Hand կոճակի վրա ստեղնել, որպեսզի մենք տեսնենք, թե ովքեր են ցանկանում խոսել, որովհետեւ հարյուրավոր մասնակիցներ ունենք այստեղ։ Էլմիրա Հակոբյան, դուք կարող եք խոսել։ Լուսինե Պետրոսյան, նաև, լսում եք։
Բարև ձեզ։ Ես շատ ուրախ եմ, որ արդեն երկրորդ անգամ մասնակցում եմ Քուլվերի կազմակերպած մեդիագրագիտության սեմինարին։ Նախորդ անգամ շատ գիտելիքներ ենք ձեռք բերել եւ արդեն այս նոր չափորոշիչներով, քանի որ կա մեդիա եւ թվային կարողունակություն, մեր հմտություններն ու կարողությունները, ստացած գիտելիքները կարողանում ենք արդեն իրականացնենք, գործածենք արդեն մեր նախադպրոցական հիմնարկներում։ Շատ կարևոր տեղեկատվություն է, թե ինչպես է ստեղծվում մեդիան, ինչպես մեդիա սպառողից դառնալ մեդիա ստեղծող, կարևոր է ինձ համար այս սեմինարը եւ մենք ամբողջ թիմով մասնակցում ենք, մանկապարտեզի ամբողջ թիմով մասնակցում ենք սեմինարին։ Շնորհակալություն։
Շատ լավ, Էլմիրա ջան, դուք որ մանկապարտեզն եք ներկայացնում։
Ներկայացնում ենք Չարենցավան համայնքի հեքիաթ մանկապարտեզը։
Շատ լավ, շնորհակալություն, Լուսինե Պետրոսյան, ձեզ ենք լսում։ Լուսինե լսում եք մեզ։ Վիկտորիա։
Ալո։
Այո։
Լուսինե Պետրոսյանի հետ նաև Անահիտ Դավիթյանն է միացել։ Ես տեխնիկական պատճառներով Լուսինեի հետ եմ լսում, հետագայում այդ հղումը կուղարկեք, որպեսզի էլի կարողանանք լսել։
Անպայման։ Շատ լավ, իսկ ակնկալիքների մասով, ինչ ակնկալիքներով եք միացել վեբինարին։
Դեռ ծանոթ չենք, առաջի անգամ ենք միանում։
Շատ լավ, շնորհակալություն Լուսինե ջան։ Վիկտորիա, դուք խոսեք, արդեն հնարավորություն ունեք։ Իսկ 6-րդ մանկապարտեզը։ Այստեղ լիքը ձեռքեր կան։ Աստղիկ Ասատրյան, դուք նույնպես կարող եք խոսել։
Բարև բոլորին, շնորհակալ եմ հնարավորության համար։ Ողջունում եմ եւ ձեզ, Ալեքսանդր ջան, եւ Տիկին Քուլվերին, երկրորդ անգամ եմ մասնակցում, անցած տարի փետրվարից, որ սկսեց նախադպրոցականի հետ կապված մեդիագրագիտության դասընթացը, բոլոր սեմինարներին մասնակցել եմ, շատ հաճելի է եւս մեկ անգամ ձեզ տեսնել։ Տիկին Քուլվեր, շատ հնարներ եմ օգտագործել իմ դասապրոցեսներին, ես տարրական դասաների ուսուցչուհի եմ, մանկապարտեզի հետ կապը այնքանով է մոտ, որ միանգամից նախադպրոցական տարիքի երեխաները գալիս են առաջին դասարան ու այն բացը կամ այն հետաքրքիր դրվագները, որ պետք է մեդիագրագիտության մասին երեխաները իմանան, ես փորձում եմ ձեզնից վերցրած այդ տեղեկատվությամբ լրացնել։ Քանի որ մեդիագրագիտությունը մեզ մոտ դեռ նոր կարելի ասել առարկա է մտնելու դպրոց, ինչպես գործընկերս նշեց, չափորոշիչներում էլ արդեն կա, շատ կարևոր եմ համարում համաշխարհային փորձը եւ հատկապես ձեր փորձը, որ ներկայացնելու եք մեզ, եւ հուսով եմ, որ այն շատ օգտակար կլինի, ակնկալիքներս մեծ են, անհամբեր սպասում եմ նորությունների։ Շատ շնորհակալ եմ հնարավորության համար։
Ձեզ նույնպես շնորհակալ ենք շատ Աստղիկ ջան, եւս երկու հոգու լսենք, այնուհետեւ խոսքը փոխանցենք Շարերին, տեսնեմ Աստղիկ, Աստղիկը խոսեց, Էլմիրան խոսեց, Անժելա, Անահիտ, դուք նույնպես կարող եք խոսել, լսում ենք ձեզ։ Մարիամ։ Մարինա, 21 մանկապարտեզ, 6 մանկապարտեզ, դուք խոսելու հնարավորություն ունեք, այնպես որ
Բարև ձեզ։ Ես Անահիտ եմ Կարապետյան, առաջին անգամ եմ մասնակցում ձեր դասընթացին։ Ակնկալիքներս շատ են, նոր գիտելիքներ, հմտություններ ձեռք բերելու, որպեսզի օգտագործեմ աշխատանքիս մեջ։ Եվ ինչպես նաև ծանոթանալու ձեզ նման մեծ մարդկանց հետ, որպեսզի մեծ գիտելիքներ ձեռք բերեմ։
Շնորհակալություն Անահիտ։ Լսում ենք ձեզ։
Բարև ձեզ։
Ողջույն։
Շնորհակալ ենք շատ նման լավ նախագծի համար։ Ես առաջին անգամ եմ մասնակցում եւ մեր ամբողջ թիմը մենք ներկայացնում ենք մեծամորի թիվ 2-րդ մանկապարտեզը շատ մեծ ակնկալիքներ ունենք հուսանք որ ձեր տվածը շատ կօգնի մեզ երեխաներին ճիշտ ուղղորդելու դեպի մեդիագրականություն
Շատ լավ, շնորհակալ եմ, կարծում եմ այսքանով կարող ենք սահմանափակվել, որպեսզի ավելի շատ ժամանակ ունենանք Շերրին լսելու հարց ու պատասխանի փուլի համար։ Ես ուղղակի երկու հավելում կատարեմ, եթե դուք ցանկանում եք լսել հայերեն թարգմանությունը, հա, Zoom հարթակում մենք այստեղ ներքևում դրա համար նախատեսված հատված ունենք, գլոբուսի նշան, եթե դուք տեսնեք, եթե հեռախոսով եք, ապա պիտի թերթեք դեպի ձախ կողմ, որպեսզի տեսնեք թարգմանչական սենյակը, այնուհետև ընտրեք Armenian տարբերակը, որպեսզի կարողանաք լսել հայերեն թարգմանությունը, եթե ոչ, ապա արդեն կլսեք անգլերեն տարբերակը, եւ ուղղակի բոլոր ներկաներին որպես տեղեկացում Մենք այս երկու վեբինարներով, ընդ որում այս վեբինարի երկրորդ հատվածը վաղը ժամի 4-ից մինչև 6-ն է լինելու, եւ հետագայում մենք նաեւ տեղական մասնագետների ներգրավվածությամբ ենք իրականացնելու վեբինարներ, նաեւ քայլ առ քայլ հիմնադրամի եւ մանկավարժական համալսարանի մեր գործընկերների հետ ենք այլ բաղադրիչներ իրականացնելու, որոնց ընթացքում նաեւ մանկավարժների ուսուցանողների ուսուցում է լինելու, հա, Երևանում եւ տարբեր ձևաչափերով, հա, սկսած գրքերի տպագրությունից հեքիաթների մինչև դրանց ներկայացումները մենք փորձելու ենք հնարավորինս հասցնել մարզերի եւ Երևանյան ամենահեռու եւ ամենամոտ, հա, մանկապարտեզներին։ Սա շատ կարճ ներկայացում, Շերի, կարծում եմ, որ կարող եք սկսել, ներողություն, որ այսքան երկար տևեց մեր նախաբանը։ Խնդրեմ։
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here with everyone. I have one, other than the people from the Public Journalism Club, I see another familiar face and a photo there. So I know that there are some folks joining that participated in prior webinars and many of you that are new. And also that there are some folks here who are more comfortable with media literacy and your understanding of it, and others who maybe are joining us for the first time. So in really thinking about this for the first time. So I will try to be mindful of all of the different people that are joining us today. I'll just say two quick things before I go to share my screen. The first one is if you spoke already and you raised your hand, that little icon, raised your hand, you need to click on lower hand to actually get rid of that. And that way, if new people want to ask a question, thank you all. If new people want to ask a question, then we'll be able to keep track of who has their hand up at any given moment. And the second is something that Alex mentioned, in that we will be meeting today and tomorrow. And so there will be aspects of this learning that will continue, that will be assuming that you've participated today and tomorrow, but you could participate in either one or both. So let me share my screen and go from there. Okay. I'll say that I'm coming to you today from Philadelphia in the United States. It's early morning here. It's a little after 7 a.m. I am in my home office here, and my dog is sitting beside me, which I know you cannot see the dog at the moment, but that could change at any moment. He might reveal himself. So just a little advance warning that you might see a dog there. Today's presentation, I've named Playful Preschoolers. So making media and information literacy topical and timely for our youngest digital media users. I note that someone who spoke earlier mentioned that they were in elementary school. So I know that most of you are working with or teaching preschoolers, but there might be folks who are also working with just young children of different ages. I think all of the information that I will go over today would be useful throughout, really, for all students. It's really what you are bringing to it is your understanding of that age and what their cognitive ability is. So I'm going to focus on preschool, but a lot of the information would be applicable to young children, really even through adolescence. This is little things about me and things I participate in. I'm not going to go through this in any detail today. There's a couple screens here, images of publications that I've written. I'm going to highlight just one or two things on here. One is at the bottom row, you can see something that says, with my face there, it says Kids Talk Media. So that's a podcast I've been doing for a few years now, with stopping for COVID in between, but where I talk to young children, 2 children at a time, a child and their best friend. And we talk about media. So some of the things I will share with you today are reflective of the comments that children have shared with me. The children that I interview are generally, I would say, ages 6 to 14, mainly because they're best at articulating themselves at those ages, but and you can access the podcast as well. It should be available to you as well. And the others you might see in the middle of the screen, or around the middle, there's the logo for Fulbright. So I actually was awarded a Fulbright this year, and I've spent the last few months traveling. My Fulbright is focused on children and media and what makes quality content for children, going across the board: television, apps, movies, video games, really thinking more broadly about what makes quality media for children. And I've been meeting with production executives and with producers and writers and scholars, first in Brazil, and then I was in the UK, in the United Kingdom, for a while, and I just returned from Australia. And so, yeah, it's been quite a hectic few months. And so I am now back in Philadelphia, and I'll be putting that info. I haven't had a chance to write that information yet. I've just been experiencing that, but more information to come. And these are just some pictures of just so you know that I actually am with children, right? Working with children, hanging out with children, and playing with kids, and that my information I'm going to share with you today is based on actually being with kids, right? Not just academic learning or book learning, but actual logged time with children. So today, this webinar aims to focus directly on what you can do in the preschool classroom, meaning I want it to be something that you can take this information and actually, right, directly use it. I want to deepen, the second bullet is deepen your understanding of the foundational concepts of media and information literacy, build your expertise in developing activities and curriculum that'll resonate with preschoolers, and encourage creative approaches to media literacy education based on best practice. So that's my goals for you for today, for us for today. And this, are you ready to, right? So today I know you might be watching on your phone, and you could be in your car, you could be walking from one place to another, you might be in your home, you might have children running around or your pet near you. So I ask you to really try and do what you can to put yourself in a space where you can focus, where you can really engage today. I don't want you to just listen. I hope you'll add comments into the chat, that you will raise your hand and ask questions. I know we have many more people joining us than we'll be able to talk to directly. So to really try to give this your attention, that's your best opportunity for it to be of value to you. So the two perspectives for today are about children and about you, right? So on the left side says actions, behaviors, skills, and knowledge that kids need in any media space, and the actions, skills, and knowledge that we need to bring to our interactions. So some of the information is about what you can share with students. Some of the information is about you, how you think about this issue. And the bottom question, how can we respond to their media engagement with imagination and hope rather than fear, right? We all have concerns about children and media and their time or what they're seeing. But what we're really hoping today to do is inspire you to bring an imaginative approach to using media to build media literacy skills in a classroom, as opposed to conveying to children your worries about that, right? So I want you, this is the questions, one of the reflective questions to you. What are the media messages in your classroom? What kind of classroom are you creating, right? So starting to think about the perhaps unintentional, some intentional and some unintentional messages about media that are happening in your classroom. So my first question, I want you to actually add some things online. Add some things in the chat. is this question: where do you think children are online? So you can be as specific as you want. Like, we know children are on YouTube, right? So you could be very specific. And I'd say that if you know that there are specific games that the children in your class like to play online, video games they like, apps they like, movies they like, you can put those in the chat so we can get a sense of where do you think children are online. The picture that we're looking at here is a picture of my daughter, who is on the left side of the picture. She is with her close friend, although in this picture, she is about 6 years old and she is now 22. But she is one of my favorite pictures because it conveys to me so much about the way kids interact with media. They are both sitting with a little Nintendo, a little Nintendo game that they can play. They are both online playing this game with each other. So they are using media, they're actually engaged with each other, but they're not looking at each other. They're not playing in the way that we might have thought about that or I might have thought about that when I was a child. So, this is really thinking about the realities of how children are connecting with media. So here are some of the places that I know they are online. And I'm sure that there are many places that children in Armenia have special people that they like to listen to, television shows that they enjoy. And we can hear children right there. We're bringing them right in. So I want to highlight a couple things that I have on the screen. I mentioned YouTube already, and we know that YouTube is actually the #1 destination for children of anything they can do. It is the #1 place. So for a long time, let's say Disney, right? Disney is very popular, and Nickelodeon is popular, and many other games, but nothing is as popular with children as YouTube. And that basically, even with very young children, YouTube is a really popular site. Then once they get to about age 8, that shifts to TikTok as being the #1. And so I'm not going to go into detail about these, but just to highlight how important those two are. And also Amazon Alexa. So Alexa, Siri, the personal digital assistants, right, that you can talk to in your phone, those have become incredibly popular with children. And they really change how kids interact with media, as well as what you might hear in your classroom about kids and media. So in my interviews with children for the podcast, just in the time that I've been doing the podcast, so everybody wants to make sure that you keep your microphone on mute, unless you have a child who actually wants to talk to us. I love it because it's reminding us that this is what we're actually talking about, our children, and we know that when we're with kids, anything can happen. So think about the reason I think it's worth pausing for a moment here and talking about Alexa and Siri and these personal digital assistants is because it illustrates something that's very true for the way media grows in our communities. And that is, adults think about how they use those assistants. Adults think about, oh, it's so convenient for me and I can ask it questions. We don't always think about the fact that it is just like the most fun that a child can have playing with something digital. They love using those digital assistants, and think about why. They don't need to spell. They don't need to actually form the question in a perfect way. They can just use their voices. They don't have to know how to type. It's so kid-friendly. So when you are thinking about media, one of the things I encourage you to think about is how something might be perceived by the child, not just by you as an adult, but by the child. When I think about my phone and I think about how useful it is to me, I don't always think about the fact that it's so easy for a child to use. You only need one finger and I can do many things on a tablet or on my phone. I can speak to it. So that ease of use is part of what makes it so enjoyable for children. And that is something to remember as you're trying to include those things in your classroom. So I think it's worth taking a moment to talk about the actual definition for media literacy and media and information literacy, which I'll clarify in a moment, before we move on. So some basics about media literacy. So when I think about media literacy, I think about the basic concept being that it's an expanded concept of literacy. When we think about being literate, we think about the ways in which we consume media and the ways we author media. So consuming media is when we were reading, right? When I was a child, we were reading. And authoring media is when we're writing or typing, right? So for today's children, what we really want is for them to be media literate means that they can do all those things with all media texts that are available in our 21st century. And a media text being not a physical textbook, but any form of media, so that they are able to consume and author with, with the internet, with a PowerPoint, with a video game, with YouTube, with a tablet, with a personal digital assistant. To be literate today means having an understanding of all of those things. The definition, the more formal definition that I refer to is the one from the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And that is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and then act using all forms of communication. So a little more formalized, but this is the access, analyze, evaluate, create. That's a good series of terms to keep coming back to in your own thinking about it in your classroom. How can I help children have easy access to media? How can I help them analyze media? How can I help them evaluate media? And how can I help them create? Someone in the very beginning mentioned that we are helping students to think about themselves not just as consumers, but as creators. And I loved that. That's such an important point. The truth is, learning to be media literate, learning about that evaluation skill and the analytical.
Analytic եւ գնահատման.
Somebody needs to make sure that they're, I think, on mute, or I'm not sure what happened there. So thinking about analyzing, with helping children analyze media and evaluate media as well. So the way I've phrased this on this page is something that I would consider even sharing with young children, right? When we think about how we use media, why we use media, who makes money on when we use media, when we use media, what kind of media we prefer. When we think about all of those components, that's what helps us to be media literate, right? That's what we mean when we say being media literate. So you might, you'll hear me actually go back and forth today. Sometimes I'll use the term media literacy and sometimes media and information literacy. Media and information literacy is the broader encompassing. Yes. Yes. I believe Alex is on.
Այո։
Bear with us for a minute. Is it okay to continue?
Հարգելի մասնակիցներ, այս ընթացքում ես ուղղակի ուզում եմ ևս մեկ անգամ հիշեցնել, որ եթե դուք ունենաք հարցեր, ովքեր մեզ հետևում են ուղիղ հեռարձակմամբ, կարող են իրենց հարցերը թողնել մեկնաբանություններում, մենք դրանք կբարձրաձայնենք այստեղ, ովքեր որ արդեն Zoom հարթակում են, վեբինարի հարթակում են, կարող են իրենց հարցերը գրել չաթում, կամ բարձրացնել ձեռքը, որից հետո մենք հնարավորություն կտանք, որպեսզի դուք բարձրաձայնեք անձամբ ձեր հարցը։ Այո, Արամ, այո, միացված է, ես տեսնում եմ հենց։ Այո, միացրել եմ։ There
Is
is
it
a
okay
technical program
Oh,
for the interpretation. Ստացվեց ձեզ մոտ։ Այո։ Dear Sherrri, you can continue.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, since we paused, let me just say that I will make sure to leave time at the end also for a Q&A time. But if there's a question that you have that's in the moment that you really want us to address right now, then please feel free to raise your hand and we'll try to do that as well. So media and information literacy is the broader term that is used globally, and it's meant to really highlight the fact that media literacy is the composite between that media and information literacy is the composite of is media and information, meaning the library side, right? And so it's really highlighting that it includes all of that. In the United States, you'll tend to hear people use the term media literacy more often because it is assumed that information is part of that. But globally, media and information literacy is what you'll tend to hear more. So that was the basic definition of media literacy. But there are 5 key questions, and I will keep coming back to these 5 questions. I think that the 5 key questions, which have been around for several decades, are a really important touchstone in helping anyone understand what it means to be media literate, right? I think these are very, very important. So the first question is about authorship. Who created the message? That concept of authorship is the absolute beginning of a conversation I would have with a preschooler. Their ability to comprehend that there is an author is a big step. That's a big step because they are consuming media, they're listening to music, they're watching movies, and they aren't necessarily thinking that someone made decisions that created the thing we're looking at. Right? That's a big leap. That takes a lot of reflective thinking to understand that. And for a young child, that takes real thought, right? As children get older and as they're creating their own, they begin to understand more easily that, of course, someone made decisions about all of that. Creating media yourself helps this to become very, very clear. I'm going to come back to this message a few times, but author. So the question is, who created the message? The second question is about format. What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? What have the creators, the authors, done to get my attention? How have they used color, music, light, actors, celebrities, all sorts of questions. What did they use to make sure that I'll keep watching, right, or consuming? Purpose. What is the purpose of this message? So first, helping them to understand that money is often a purpose of the message, right? Somebody is making money and that's why they're doing it, right? And that's a very important preliminary skill for someone to understand about media. And then beyond that, there's entertainment or information purpose. Audience is the next question. How might different people understand this message differently? So again, that really takes critical thinking. It takes reflective thinking to understand that I might watch it and laugh, but somebody else might watch it and feel differently. They might not think it's funny at all. They might be offended. They might be sad. People have different reactions to the same kind of content. A media literate person understands that. And then about content, what values and points of view are represented or omitted from the message. So and we're going to talk about this in more detail. So any kind of media message, whether it's a commercial for McDonald's or somebody encouraging you to drink Coca-Cola, or watching a Disney movie, or watching a movie that you might show in a classroom, an educational video, those all have a point of view. They are communicating things that are good or bad, things that are proper to do or improper to do, correct ways of acting, correct ways of interacting with people. There are lots of value messages embedded. So a media literate person understands, asks questions about that. So those 5 key questions, right, are related to author, format, purpose, audience, and content. And I think that when you're considering how to structure activities in a classroom to help preschool children understand media literacy, I would use those, because that's easy to remember for kids, right? They're 5. They may be words that they're not as familiar with, some of them, but they could easily learn all of those words. And then they would be able, you could keep going back to them and structure all activities connected to those words. I've actually been working on this sort of pyramid. I don't know if you're familiar with the food pyramid, right? Where we teach children how to think about what foods to eat. I've been working on creating sort of a food pyramid for media and information literacy. What do we want children to understand when they're preschoolers, and how do we scaffold that as they get older, right? And so that they learn more. So looking at we're not going to worry about the top of this with teens, but looking at the first 2 lines, I just want to highlight it because one of the challenges that preschool teachers often have is you might understand what you think people need to know about media. The question is, how do you structure it so that a preschooler will be interested in it and will understand it? And so in the beginning, at that very bottom level, it says, watch or play what I give you. It's okay if I say it is okay, right? So that when children are born and they're using a tablet, you can go online, you can go on the internet and find lots of pictures of babies using tablets to like navigate through different baby games that they can access. That's because a parent, right, a parent or caregiver took that tablet, decided what they should look at, and handed it to the child. That person, that adult or babysitter is the caregiver, is the decider of that when a child is at their youngest stage. And actually, as it scaffolds higher, there's more and more responsibility given to the child directly. So how do we, as with many other things that we give them responsibility, how do we help them understand the responsibility before we let them navigate it themselves? So that second one that's in green says, you can play video games after you finish your homework. Did you finish your homework? Right? So we might say to children when they're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, was there something that you were supposed to do that you get to use media after you do this other activity, right? So that might be, did you get up and clean your room? Oh, okay, now you can play a video game. Or did you do your homework? Did you practice your piano or your sports or whatever other activities you have? Did you call your grandmother? Like whatever those responsibilities might be, so that they are seeing their media use as a decision that gets weighed against other responsibilities. That's the value of having them ask that question. So what you're building, sorry, my dog is opening my door here. I'm just going to close this for a moment. I apologize for that. So that what you're building is their ability to be reflective thinkers about their media use. That's what we're trying to build, is someone who has those media literacy skills inside them and uses it in all of their interactions. He just opened the door again. We're just going to let him barrel through the door. Okay, so when I think about what I want preschoolers to really learn about media literacy, I think about these 3 points. I want them to learn the power of asking questions. specifically the power of asking the 5 key media literacy questions that we just reviewed. I want them to learn that. The second thing is that I want them to really start to be clear about the difference between real life and media life, right? What does it mean to interact with someone in person? And what is the difference between interactions that are mediated, whether that mediation is you and a television, you and a video screen, you and an app or a game, on and on and on, right? You and a book, that's still mediated. So the difference between real life and media life. And then I want them to understand that there's value in understanding where information comes from. That when we want to figure out what kind of information is reliable, we need to understand where information comes from. Tomorrow, the focus is going to be much more on that last bullet. Tomorrow, we're going to focus more on, I would use the word news, although of course preschoolers are not looking at news. So how do you get information and evaluate information? Because we want, again, to scaffold that learning for preschoolers so that they are using critical thinking skills to evaluate information. So they build that skill so that as they're learning more complex information, they already have that skill in place. So let's take a few minutes and look at 3 different activities. Sorry, I'm just going to maneuver my screen a little bit here. Okay. This first one about asking the 5 key questions, I'm going to lead you through an activity here, and I encourage you to sort of play along in your mind, right? And play along as if you're participating. You can clearly see that I love dogs, right? That's not my dog in that picture. My dog is a pit bull, and he's a very big dog, but he is not that dog. But what I've done is I've tried to find a picture that I thought would be one image that would be really engaging for a young child. So, so here's a picture of a dog holding flowers. Okay, now I could just show them as an activity. We could just look at that picture and ask the 5 key questions. And we can do that with any still image. We could do it with any moving image. I'm looking at still image first. So who's the author of that picture? What is the format? What creative techniques did they use to attract my attention? Why is there this picture? What is the purpose of this picture? Audience, how might different people understand this message differently? And content, right? What are the values that are embedded in this? So let's walk through this a bit, because what I want you to see is that you can do this with anything. Sometimes I've done this with an image that is more clearly an advertisement, right? Or you could do this with especially something like a breakfast cereal or something that kids might eat. So something that the kids would interact with. So who's the author of this? And we can have this conversation with kids. Who's the author? So they might understand that somebody had to take the picture, right? This is not a real dog, but this is a picture of a dog. So somebody took a picture. Somebody decided that the picture would not show the dog's paws, right? That it would be framed in a way that we would really focus on the dog's eyes, and that the framing would, so that author made decisions about what the picture should look like. That's when we get into format. What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? So by framing the picture a certain way, it encourages me as the person looking at it to see it a certain way. It encourages me to look at the dog's eyes, to look at the dog's nose, to look at the flowers in a certain way. That person, what creative techniques did they use to attract my attention? So we're still on format. They put the flowers in the dog's mouth. They did something that they could have put the flowers in a vase, but they didn't. They decided to put it in the dog's mouth. And that makes me look at it as like, right, I wonder immediately as a viewer, why would they be putting flowers in a dog's mouth? Dogs don't eat flowers, right? You could even ask kids, do dogs eat flowers? Is the dog going to eat these flowers? Why would a dog have flowers in their mouth? So we're asking ourselves these questions about the style, even the fact that creative techniques, the flowers are pink, the background is a shade of pink. The green sort of pops out. So you can have really a detailed conversation about format. Purpose, why are we looking at this picture? Why did someone take this picture? How is it being used? Now, we're looking at the picture, we don't know, right? So we're going to make guesses. Why might somebody have made this picture? Oh, maybe it's a picture that somebody took of their dog to share with their family that couldn't see the dog. So maybe I have a grandmom, she lives far away, I send her a picture of my dog. I guess that's one possibility. What's another possibility? Maybe this dog is the star of a TV show where he's the dog with the bow tie, and that's the TV show that he's the star of, right? That could be one. What else could this be? Oh, maybe this is about birthday presents. Maybe it's an ad for birthday presents and that you should give flowers on somebody's birthday. And it's just a picture of a dog giving the flowers. So you could just use your imagination. What are all the different possible reasons, the possible purposes that someone might have created this picture? Then we move on to audience. How might different people understand this picture differently? I think this is such an important question. So I said to you before, I love dogs. I look at this picture, and I years ago had a dog that looked sort of like this dog. So when I look at this picture, I think happy thoughts. I think I want to pet this dog. I'd love to cuddle this dog. He's so cute, right? This is like a picture that conveys something really positive to me. But other people might look at this picture and think very different reactions. So they might not like dogs, right? They might not like golden retrievers, which is the kind of dog this is. Maybe they don't like big dogs. Maybe they don't like light-haired dogs. Maybe they don't like flowers. Maybe they're allergic to flowers. Maybe maybe their dog went in their garden last week and ripped the flowers out, and that actually, they got in trouble because their dog was in the flower bed. I mean, there's all sorts of things that different people bring to that picture, that when they look at it, they see something different. This is one of the reasons why the question is great in a classroom, because you have a ready-made group of people. They're going to look at it and see it differently. So we talk about purpose. I'm talking about audience. And then the last one is content. What values, what attitudes, what points of view are embedded in this image that it's conveying something. So I would say to you that there is a point of view in this picture that dogs are something people like to look at, that dogs are cute. That's an assumption that the author made in making this picture. It's not a picture of an angry dog or a scary dog. It's just, although you do see the teeth, right? Some kids might look at that and think, oh, I see their teeth there. So what are the messages about this? This question about content and what are the values that are shown, that's this particular image, we don't have as much to talk about with that. So different pictures, different videos will have different, one of the 5 questions or 2 of the 5 questions that might be better questions to have a long conversation about, but you can always talk about all of them. And this point I wrote at the bottom, I wrote a little line of, you're learning to be media literate. So it's not enough to just, as a teacher, it's not enough for us to ask the questions. Let's talk about the author. Let's talk about the format. That's not enough. You want to actually say, as you're doing this activity, look what we're doing. We're learning to be media literate, right? Great answer to that question, Sherry. When you answer the question about author, you're learning to be media literate. Class, you are all being so media literate, right? You can affirm for them the terminology. I see that we do have a hand up. Do we want to take a question, or I'm not sure. We can maybe jump in with one question, and then we'll continue on. I only.
Եթե դուք հարցեր ունեք, կարող եք հենց հիմա ձեր ձեռքը բարձրացնել, որից հետո մենք հնարավորություն կտանք, որպեսզի դուք խոսեք։ Մինչև այդ ես տեսա, որ որոշ մասնակիցներ գրել են, որ հայերեն լսելու խնդիր ունեն, անգլերեն լսում, դրա համար ուղղակի հուշում, եթե համակարգչով եք միացել, Zoom հարթակում ներքևում գլոբուսի նշան ունենք, որի վրա եթե սեղմեք, կարող եք ընտրել Armenian տարբերակը եւ լսել հայերենը։ Եթե հեռախոսով եք միացել, ուղղակի պետք է մի քանի էջ թերթեք դեպի ցախ, որից հետո ընտրեք սենյակը, հա, թարգմանչական սենյակը եւ լեզուն, որը որ նախընտրում եք լսել վեբինարը։ Հարցեր։
We can continue if there. Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's continue.
So the second activity that you could consider in your classroom, I'm saying is action. Like, you know, when we're about to on a movie set and they say action, right? With let's make a movie. So this is really about creating media. Okay, and an important thing to remember about media and information literacy in a classroom is that you do not need digital media to have conversations about digital media, right? So you may have books in your classroom, but maybe you don't have a computer. Maybe you don't have tablets. Maybe you don't have, right? You may not have that kind of technology in your classroom, and that's fine. You can have a very deep media literacy conversation without technology in a room, okay? And here's an example. So the activity, the first activity also was an example. So in this case, though, here we are, we're talking about movies. So what I wrote on the bottom left side says, so the steps: distribute scripts from a favorite movie, and I'll explain that in a minute. Assign a role to each student, and those roles could be writer, director, floor manager, actor number one, actor number two, somebody who's thinking about the sound, somebody who's thinking about lighting, somebody who's thinking about casting, costumes, the set, the audience. Now, it's entirely possible that students in your room are not going to know what all of those people do. And maybe you don't even know what all of those people do. But you could, be very easy to get information about that. And then you're playing, right? You're playing the idea of making a movie. When I say distribute scripts from a favorite movie, let's say they love the movie The Lion King, right? Or Frozen. Frozen is a movie that, right, many children love. So you don't need to have the actual script from Frozen. I'm not expecting preschoolers to be reading the full script of Frozen, but you could actually make sheets that say the word script at the top, and maybe just have 4 sentences on that page. So it has the character name and a sentence. It could say, you know, Elsa and, you know, or Ola, right? It could have the character, a couple characters there. And it could just say things like, come on, let's go play. And then another character could say, wait, I'm worried I'm melting, right? As well, Mike was melting in Frozen. So you can make it very simple for preschoolers, because it's not the script itself that is the activity. It's the ability to talk about the media embedded in that. So you can have an activity where you've assigned the roles, and you even say things like, okay, Sherry, you're in charge of costumes. What should they wear? The costume person thinks about what they wear. And maybe you have a little basket in the room that's just things that you play with clothing. Or maybe, you know, you put on somebody else's coat or somebody else's scarf as part of your costume. And you think about the lighting. Maybe you have a flashlight and you shine the flashlight on them. Or you draw a picture of a flashlight and aim that at the person. So you don't even have a real flashlight in your room, but you are the idea of light coming from there, or a big light that would shine down on me. You could make a picture of that out of construction paper. And maybe somebody plays the audience so that someone is watching when they talk and they clap at the end, or they laugh during that. Then when that's over, you can have a conversation with the 5 questions. So you're playing the game of acting out the movie. You could even make up a movie together, right? You could say, let's make a movie about going to the grocery store. And we come up with our lines. We actually figure out those. So it depends how complex you want to make it. But then you want to talk about who was the author of that? What techniques did we use to attract our attention, right? How did we use the costumes? How did we use lighting? Some kids probably will do things with a funny voice. How did the funny voice attract attention? So format, you're going to talk about purpose. Why did we do this? Oh, it was an assignment that our teacher made us do. Okay, why else? Right? How might different people understand this? The audience question, and then content. So you're taking the activity and applying media literacy 5 key questions to that activity. Activity 3 is a reflective activity for you. So the first 2 activities are things you can do with students in your classroom. But this 3rd activity is one where you are reflecting on yourself. What are the media literacy messages, media and information literacy messages in your room? The picture on the far left, right, of the Little Mermaid, and then you can see there's a little insert of a light that has Mickey Mouse on it. Both of those pictures I took when I was in Armenia in 2021. We went into a preschool classroom, and we were, here I was many miles away from the birthplace of Disney in Los Angeles, California. But Disney movies are popular all over the world, and here are characters of a Disney movie on the wall. Maybe there are books in your classroom that are books of movies. So the movie, a very famous Pixar movie was called Up. And that picture that I have right there is the book of the movie. So they have taken the movie and created a book out of it. And then the last one on the far right is a teacher and a student. How are your questions in the classroom providing media literacy messages? So what I want you to think about are those intentional and unintentional messages. On the wall, by putting pictures of a Disney movie on the wall, and none of these are bad. Let me say this, none of these are bad. It's an awareness. We're not talking about bad or good. We're talking about being aware of the media and information literacy messages in your room. And how can you have the messages that you want to have, right? So by putting characters from popular movies on a wall, you are sending a message to children that they should know who those characters are, and that they probably should have watched that movie, right? So if you haven't watched that movie, you might go home and say, Mom, I want to watch The Little Mermaid. There's a picture of The Little Mermaid in my classroom, and I've never seen that movie. So that's a point of view that the teacher has put in the room. Having Mickey Mouse on a light switch is conveying that Mickey Mouse is a character that you should know who that character is. That's why the teacher put it in the room. The teacher probably put it in the room because the teacher's assuming that, right, you're assuming that, or we're assuming that the students know these characters and like them, and that it will make the classroom fun and inviting by having the characters there. So there are assumptions in those images. There's an assumption with the books that, please make sure to have your microphone on mute. Not sure who. Do we know who that is? Everyone, please pause for a minute and just everyone make sure their microphone is on mute. Thank you. Okay, so the books that are in the bookshelf, hopefully there are books in your classroom. So how did you choose those books? And you can even have that conversation with your students, or maybe there are DVDs in the room. So you could even say to them, I have DVDs in this room. Where do you think they came from? How did we choose the DVDs in this room? They might have never thought about that, or they might not realize that, you have maybe no budget to buy movies, or you have a little budget to buy movies. And so you're using movies that you could find or that somebody gave you. So helping them be aware of how does media appear in their lives is what you're doing. You're helping them to take things that might be invisible to them and actually make them aware that there are media messages all around them in their lives. The far right, the point of it from your questions is, how we talk about media, how we frame media in our conversations with kids tells them a lot about how they should feel about media, right? So if my questions are things like, did you have fun playing a video game this weekend? Tell me about the video games you played this weekend. That sends a message to children that you can have fun when you play video games, and you should have fun when you play video games, and that it's okay for me to talk about video games in my class, right? It's embedded in those questions. But what if my question was, how much time did you all spend watching television yesterday? Did anybody spend more than an hour watching television yesterday? And then children are wondering whether they should raise their hand, because embedded in the way the question is asked is the feeling that you should not be watching a lot of television, right? So thinking about the way you bring up media in your classroom, do you do it thinking about the imaginative aspects of media, the fun of media, the learning through media, right? The information you can gain through media, or are you doing it from a position of fear, censorship, protecting, like, don't look at that. That might be something that'll scare you. Make sure that you're not watching that. That could be that your parents might be mad at you if they see that. So what are the messages that you're conveying? And so I encourage you to spend some time walking through your classroom, looking at your curriculum, looking at the ways you talk about media, and thinking about ways you can make sure that the script you use or the images you use are conveying media literacy messages. Putting actually, preschool teachers do great things in their physical classrooms, right? There's all sorts of color and words to learn. I would say, why not put those 5 key questions on the wall, or even the words, author, audience, content, format, purpose. Those are great things to have on the wall in your classroom because it will encourage conversation. That's what we're trying to do, is encourage those conversations. And so thinking about how these approaches would work with preschoolers, and then what are the limits of that? So one limit is whether or not you have media in your room, right? Whether you have digital technology in your room. I've already mentioned there's ways around that, but that's what we need to recognize, that can be a limitation. How many kids are in your room can be a limit. How much time you feel you have to talk with them. So just being aware that there are limits, but there are workarounds, right, to all of those. And maybe when I open it for questions, which we'll do in just another 5 minutes, are there specific limitations that you are dealing with that you feel make it difficult for you to bring this into your classroom, right? There are a couple of resources that I want to mention before we talk about, before I ask for your questions. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I can share this PowerPoint with you afterwards. I think they'll be able to distribute this. But all of these it's just a few resources. They're all free and they're all accessible online. And so they're all meant to be information for you. They're not things for the classroom. They're not resources in your classroom. They're resources for you. So the 4 that are, the 4 that are on here are, one is the core principles of media literacy education. It says in the United States, it's through the National Association for Media Literacy Education, but it's a free download and it is something that would be useful. It's not long, just a few pages, and would be very useful to you no matter where you live in the world. The next 2, so the one on the bottom says Media and Information Literacy for the Sustainable Development Goals, and then the one to the right, Media and Information Literate Citizens, Think Critically, Click Wisely. Those are both resources from UNESCO. The Sustainable Development Goals is a very formal academic yearbook. But the reason I put it on here is because connecting to the Sustainable Development Goals is something that teachers often do bring into their classrooms. I'm going to show you a picture of that in a minute. And so thinking about how MIL, Media and Information Literacy, connects to those goals can be a really interesting class theme, right? And then the one on the far right, Media Literacy for Young Children, is a book that is that you can purchase online that is tremendous. Faith Rogo is the author. She does a lot of work with preschoolers and media literacy and media and information literacy. And the book is, I have it, I'll actually show you. Right, this is the book. And right, so it's like almost sort of workbook. It's a soft cover book, not very expensive, and I know it's accessible. So there's a lot of information in all of these, which we don't have time to go through today. This is just a brief, I think I'm just going to run through them quickly, and then we'll go to questions. If we have time, I can always come back to this. But these are the core principles. The actual download takes each of these 6 and provides several pages about each one. These are the Sustainable Development Goals from UNESCO and from the UN. And so you could think about, there's a segment of the media and information literacy community that's called eco media literacy. And it's really about the way in which the environment is affected by media and how media affects our environment. And so you can, these are the goals themselves, but particularly number 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, talks about information and getting information that is trustworthy and the value of that. And so that really connects to media and information literacy. This is just to get this, I'm sorry, the UNESCO curriculum, Think Critically, Click Wisely. That is a free download, but it is a comprehensive, very detailed curriculum that is not specifically for preschool teachers, but could be used in an educational environment of any kind. It will really help to broaden your thinking about all the different topics that actually are connected to media and information literacy. It's really an excellent book to look at. So as you're thinking about this for your classes, remember you want to think about ways to engage their brains and their hands, their minds, and right, your attitude, and what you bring about media, and the physical environment that you're in, the space that you're in, so that you can engage them. Let's pause here for a minute. I'm actually going to stop sharing, and let's see if we can get some questions that we can hear from folks.
Անչափ շնորհակալություն Շերրի, քո փորձով ամերիկյան փորձով կիսվելու համար։ Կարծում եմ, որ չնայած տեխնիկական որոշակի խնդիրներին, հնարավորինս կարողացանք մատչելի կերպով փոխանցել ինֆորմացիան մեր լսարանին։ Հարգելի մասնակիցներ, արդեն կարող եք ձեռք բարձրացնել, ձեր հարցերը տալ, դուք այդ հնարավորությունը ունեք։ Հարցիմե Հարությունյան, ոնց որ։
Ահա։ Ներեցեք, ես կուզենայի ավելի կարճ, ինչպես կանոն, հասկանայի ինչ է նշանակում մեդիագրագիտություն եւ այդ 6 սկզբունքները, էլի, այդ կետերը, ոնց որ հստակ, էլի, որպեսզի գրվի, ավելի աչքին տեսանելի լինի եւ չմոռանանք, այսպես ասեմ։
Իրականում մեր հարցաշարի մեջ էլ դրա վերաբերյալ հարց կար, թե ինչ է մեդիագրագիտությունը, եւ մեր առաջարկված տարբերակներից մեկը հենց Շերրին վեբինարի սկզբում ցույց տվեց։
Դե կապի խնդիրը թույլ չէր տալիս այդքան լավ բան անենք, էլի, թարգմանությունը։
Շատ լավ։ Sheri?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Կարող եք եւս մեկ անգամ ձևակերպել մեդիագրագիտության սահմանումը եւ անդրադառնալ այն կետերին, որոնք որ
I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. So, right, this is the definition of media literacy, right? The ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So media literacy is, if in a more conversational way, I'll say, media literacy is helping someone to understand the influence that media has in their life and the way in which the media industry operates. So helping them to helping young people to understand. And so we talked about, so to me, actually, the 5 key questions are at the core of understanding the definition of media literacy. I think that's a good way to frame and you're thinking about media literacy. I'm just going to go back. This is a little bit in the PowerPoint here, right? So we first said that thinking about media and information literacy as an expanded concept of literacy, right? When you think about all the reasons why we want kids to be literate, same basic concept there. So their understanding of media institutions, meaning the companies themselves, what do they understand about Disney? I go back to Disney a lot because that's something that often even very, very young children, like even as young as 3, know the word Disney often. Nowadays, they often know the word Disney, TikTok, and YouTube. Those are 3 things that from a media standpoint, they often know. So you can talk about that. You know, you can talk about the idea of when you go to the store and you want, like, what are things they like to do? Here's a way to have this conversation. What are things you like to do? And they'll say something. Okay, let's say you like to go fishing. So when you go fishing, what are the things that you use to go fishing? How do you make decisions about fishing? Okay, well, let's do that for media. We want to be knowledgeable about media, understand how to use it, understand how not to hurt ourselves, right? All of those things are what it means to be responsible, media literate, using media. Did that answer your question? Is that basically what you're asking?
Լսում եք ձեզ սրբսինը։
Ահա, շնորհակալություն։ Շնորհակալ եմ։
Ձեզ նույնպես շնորհակալություն, այլ հարցեր ունենք հարգելի մաս։ Լավ, այդուհանդերձ ինձ մոտ դեռ հարցեր կան, քանի դեռ մեր մասնակիցները իրենց հարցերը կգնեն կամ կբարձրաձայնեն, ես հարցնեմ։ Կա ինչ-որ փուլ, որից հետո մանկավարժները, երբ որ կիրառում են այս փորձը, խոսում են երեխաների հետ, կիրառում են տարբեր ձևաչափեր, դրանից հետո ինչ-որ գնահատում անցկացնեն, որպեսզի հասկանան, թե որքանով կարողացան արդյունավետ կիրառել այդ մեթոդները եւ ինչ ազդեցություն ունեցավ ընդհանուր մեթոդների կիրառումը։ Շնորհակալ եմ։
So I actually, even with my college students, I've done this where you could do a way that, let me say this, a way that formal researchers often test knowledge is to do a pre and post test, right? You ask people a question and see what their answer is. Then you teach them something. Then you ask them that question again, right? So you might ask me a question, ask me to look at, or ask a child in a preschool classroom, you could ask them to have a conversation with you about an image, right? Or like a picture that looks like an advertisement, let's say, and see what they say. Can you tell me who the author is? Can you tell me what the purpose is? Can you, right? Ask them basic questions in a preschool friendly way, then do some media literacy education, right? Some learning in the classroom, and then ask those questions again. Not about the exact same picture, but with a different example. So do they then understand how to apply those questions to other forms of media? That's one way. Very frankly, I think one of the challenges for media and information literacy for the whole field is that the assessment part is a little more, it's nuanced. It's just more challenging, right? It's not like teaching them math, where you teach them how to count, and then you can teach them how to add, and you can give them, right, math problems, and they can figure them out. It's easy to test that. Here, you're really testing their critical thinking skills. That's what that's what we're working on, is their critical thinking skills. So you need to ask questions that reflect their assessment. You know, it depends how you do testing in your classroom. If you need to do a formal test where they're actually like sitting at a desk by themselves, writing something, that's one kind of test. Another is just, do I need to have a sense of my classroom? How can I tell if they understand? Then you can ask the questions I'm talking about and engage with them in those questions. But basically, any kind of testing is going to ask them to see whether they understand those basic concepts and those terms that we mentioned. I think that's a good place to start.
Շնորհակալություն, եւ հաջորդ հարցը արդյոք ԱՄՆ-ում մեդիագրագիտության դասավանդման վերապատրաստումն անցկացվում են, թե չէ, հանքավարժների շրջանում, եւ արդյոք մեդիագրագիտությունը դասավանդում են մանկապարտեզներում, եթե այո, ինչպես է այդ գործընթացը տեղի ունենում, մի փոքր նկարագրեք, շատ շնորհակալություն.
So the United States does not require, the United States does not require media literacy to be taught in any classroom. That is changing. There are elements of media literacy that are in our core curriculum standards, and there are individual states that have strong media literacy requirements, but not all of them. And the need to incorporate it in preschool education is new. I would say if you look back over several decades, often media literacy education was focused on high school, middle school, high school, not elementary school. That has dramatically changed in the last few years as recognition of how much digital media young children are using, right? As we know more about how many hours a day they are engaging, and they're, so much of our lives, 24 hours a day, have some sort of media, digital media connected to it. And that has led many scholars and many child development experts and others to strongly encourage that media literacy education begin at the earliest possible age. So this conversation we are having now, this webinar, is really at the forefront of these conversations. There are not a lot of people who are recognizing how important it is. I often will say that there's nothing that you do for hours a day, every day, that you shouldn't be knowledgeable about. If you are chewing gum 6 hours a day, every day or more, you should know a lot about gum. You should know what it's doing to your teeth and whether it's good for or bad for it, and is it hurting your jaw, and how much it costs. And you should understand that. So media is something that we are using, especially digital media, is something we are using and kids are using for hours and hours and hours every day. It's irresponsible for us to not help them understand the influence of all that digital time on their lives. They must have that information. And we cannot wait until they're in high school for that. And that's why this webinar is so, so important. So, you know, if this question comes up, sort of why, if you ask a room of teachers or parents or school administrators this question, do you think children are using media? Yes, absolutely, they'll say. Do you think they're using a lot of media? Yes. Do you think they're using a lot of digital media? Yes. Like, you know, do you think they're using it at a medium level, a high level, or a super high level? Most people will say super high level. So if that's true, there's nothing else they're learning that could possibly be more important than them learning media literacy. Every single other learning that they do is through media. They're reading books to learn about math. They're looking at movies to learn about what's happening in the world. Their learning is mediated. They have to have media and information literacy skills first. And that's why it has to start with preschool. I think I got off this subject a little bit. I get very passionate about this. Let's get a couple more questions. Can we get a couple more questions?
Այո, եւս 3 հարցում ենք տարբեր տեղերից զուգակցված մեր մասնակիցներից, նաև էլեկտրոնային փոստով։ Նման հարց կա, արդյոք ներկայացված փորձը ինչ որ կերպ նաև կիրառելի է ներառական կրթության համատեքստում։ Արդյոք այդ մոտեցումները նույնն են մնում, եթե ներառական կրթության տեսանկյունից ենք դիտարկում այս հարցին։
Can you, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by inclusive education.
Այստեղ դիտարկում են երեխաները, ովքեր խնդիրներ ունեն լսողության, տեսողության, ֆիզիկական եւ մտավոր, այո, խնդրեմ։
Yeah, well, they're all consuming media too. You know, I don't think it's not leaving anybody behind. So so we'd see, I don't see any reason why the conversation would not, I mean, the same basic questions need to be asked. Certainly if someone has a problem with their hearing, they're going to be able to provide less information about insights that have to do with audio. If someone has a problem with their eyes, they're going to have less information visual, but you know, and whatever their disability might be. But overall, all children are consuming a lot of media. I think their disability would not alter that fact, and so they still need media literacy skills.
Շնորհակալություն, մեր հաջորդ հարցը ծնողների եւ մանկավարժների այս համատեքստում հաղորդակցությանն է վերաբերվում, ինչպես անել, որ ծնողները եւ մանկավարժները նույն թիմում լինեն երեխաների մեդիագրագիտության բարձրացման ուղղված աշխատանքներում, հա, ինչ մարտահրավերներ կան եւ ինչպես կարելի է այդ կապը ստեղծել, որ այն աշխատանքը, որը մանկավարժն է տանում։
That's a great question.
Պարտեզում նույնը նաեւ տանում եւ փոխադարձ։
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that engaging parents is a worthwhile and important component of a strong media literacy program in the preschool and elementary school environment. We know that the greatest predictor of a child's media literacy, we know that the greatest predictor of a child's media use is their parents' media use, right? Parents that watch a lot of TV have kids that watch a lot of TV. Parents that can't put their phone down and leave their, you know, social media aside have kids that have less ability to do that. So often parents have not had any sort of media literacy training, right? Or understanding. So I generally suggest that having a couple parent meetings where what I would suggest is having a parent workshop or two with the title of, "Are you concerned about your children and media?" That title will get lots of parents to show up because parents are concerned. And then when they're in the room, you can talk about what it means to be media literate and how important it is for that to be something that happens in the home, and actually do a basic media literacy program. The advantage, whether it's with children or parents or teachers, one of the advantages of this topic is that people generally love they have media that they love, and they enjoy talking about it. Kids enjoy learning about media literacy. It's not a struggle. Kids like to talk about this. They like to gain insight. They like to learn more. They like to analyze media. Parents usually do too. My experience is that parents usually do too, but they're not bringing an awareness of that in their home. So if we were able to help parents incorporate some of those, that would really be key. I think your question about the need, the parents really need to be on board. You can, at the most basic level, you could create a one sheet that says, this school or this classroom is about to embark on a new module about media and information literacy. Media and information literacy is this, and give them that quick definition. We will be doing activities and things in our classroom. We hope you'll do those things at home, or send kids home with the 5 key questions. And a little homework assignment is that you have to sit and watch a TV show with your family and talk about the 5 key questions. So I would definitely try to engage the family.
Շնորհակալություն Շերրի, ես զուգահեռ հետևում եմ մեր հեռարձակմանը YouTube-ում եւ փորձում եմ նաեւ մեկնաբանություններից հարցեր դուրս գրել։ Հարցերը շատ են, ցավոք մենք հնարավորություն չունենք բոլորին անդրադառնալու եւ արձագանքելու այս համատեքստում, բայց ամեն դեպքում հանրային լրագրության ակումբը շարունակում է աշխատել այս ուղղությամբ եւ դուք ձեր հարցերը կարող եք գրել մեզ, կփորձենք նաեւ մենք արձագանքել։ Ես ուղղակի հիշեցնեմ, որ վաղը դեկտեմբերի 21-ին մենք կունենանք երկրորդ հանդիպում Շերրի Քուլվերի հետ եւ կրկին նույն համատեքստում մեդիագրագիտության, քննադատական մտածողության եւ sharing ներկայացնի ամերիկյան փորձը, այն մեթոդները, որոնք իրենք կիրառում են արդեն նահանգներում։ Կարծում եմ, որ այն շատ հետաքրքիր կլինի բոլորի համար, փորձի փոխանակման տեսանկյունից, մանավանդ հաշվի առնելով, որ մենք շարունակելու ենք մեր վեբինարների շարքը նաեւ տեղական փորձագետների հետ եւ նաեւ դեմարտեմ հանդիպումներ ենք ունենալու մեր մանկավարժների հետ։ Եվս մեկ անգամ շնորհակալություն Շերրի, շնորհակալություն մեր բոլոր մասնակիցներին, կհանդիպենք վաղը։
Thank you, everyone.